From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
For Patricia Cornwell, I want to have Ned Martell from the Washington Post come up and do the introduction. Welcome, Ned.
Peter, thank you. Thank you all for coming today. It's a great afternoon for the Book Festival, Library of Congress, and the Washington Post. Been charter members since we got this going in 2001, and we're happy to welcome Patricia Cornwell today. Has there ever been an author like Patricia Cornwell to give so much to her readers? I was just thinking about, Postmortem came out in 1986, and now we're on this year, next month, will be the 20th Kay Scarpetta novel. That's a durable, strong female protagonist. But it tells us something of what Patricia Cornwell has given to us as readers, a sense of herself. What it means to be a child of the Carolina mountains, whose imagination took her so far. What it means to be politically active in both parties. What it means to marry another woman when you live a public life. And on top of that, to marry a psychiatrist who teaches at Harvard. I mean, in that relationship, there's no hiding, right? I mean, right now, the book that is on sale in the sales tents is The Red Mist, and that's #1 on the paperback list. And next month, we're looking forward to The Bone Bed. And I was thinking about that. In The Bone Bed, there's going to be a paleontologist who has gone missing in Canada. But of course, the turmoil resounds to where Kay lives through apparently the curious talking of her niece and some unspoken troubles of her colleagues. But most of all, we leave it to a talent like Ms. Cornwell to show us that the topics may be dinosaurs in the dirt, but we're dealing with so many layers of human behavior and secrets that only Kay Scarpetta can unearth. So please join me in welcoming Patricia Cornwell.
Wow, what a crowd. Thank you, thank you. You know, I can't think of anything better when I actually get to look at some of my readers in the face. So thank you for the privilege today to say hello to all of you, and I am so grateful that you took the time to come here. How many are you local? Most. How many of you traveled some distance to be here? Wow. Well, again, of course, I'll just assume this was all for me, but it's sort of like when I was in London a few years ago to get the Galaxy Book Award, and we were going up this red carpet, and all these people were holding out things to be signed, and so I thought I'd be nice, and I reached for this little boy's thing. He said, "Oh, no, that's not for you, that's for J.K. Rowling." So I don't know, some of you might be here for somebody else. But one of the things that's really fun about this festival is it represents two groups of people very heavily who do a lot to keep us honest in this world. One is journalists, because there's a lot of journalists here, and the other's librarians. And I had a very funny experience last night where I was giving a little talk at the Library of Congress, and I was introduced to the Librarian of Congress, which sort of makes him the Librarian of the United States of America. And my first impulse when I shook his hand is I thought, where I started remembering all my terrors as a child of being late returning a library book. Or, God forbid, you couldn't find a library book, because that was pretty much a felony as a kid. That was about as much trouble as you could get into. And then I remembered, how many of you remember the days of, the card in the back of the book? And what's one of the first things you would do is you wanted to see who else had checked out the same thing you did. So that was what began my time as an investigator. Was I would start looking at who had signed out the same book that I had. Usually you hoped it was somebody really cool. In my case, usually it wasn't, because I checked out strange things. In fact, it was pretty typical that maybe the book hadn't been checked out for 3 years until I got it, which added to my feeling a little bit like a loser and isolated and all those other awful things we feel in school. And so now that has segued into a whole different arena of we don't check out books that way anymore. But now, how many of you use iPads or Kindles? I mean, it's okay. We're here to celebrate the book, but in any form. So I had this very funny experience. I have an iPad to travel with. And my partner set up the account for it, and there's a couple other people that are on this same account. And what I didn't realize is that when I would download a book, an ebook, it wasn't going to my iPad, it was going to my partner's aunt's iPad. And so Stacy gets this phone call one morning from her aunt who says, I don't know what's going on here. She says, suddenly on my iPad there is sexual homicide and also all these 50 Shades of Grey book. And I said, no, that's for research. I don't read things like that. I just wanted to know why it's so popular. Well, then why did you get 3 of them? I don't know. That was probably, they went in the cart by mistake. So once again, books will get you. I mean, they tell the truth. Oh, I hear my favorite sound, a helicopter going by. And by the way, do you know how hard it is for a helicopter pilot to have to ride in a golf cart? That's how I just got here, was in a golf cart. And I said, this is really, there's no engine, there's no nothing. I mean, I'm waiting for that to go by. What we're going to do in a minute is I'm going to open up the floor because I want you to ask me questions. I want to get into a dialogue. I will start by saying a couple of things that are going on with me. First of all, yes, Red Mist just came out in paperback, and I'm going to be signing that in a little while for anybody who's interested. And it is very good news that it's #1 on the New York Times list for mass market paperback. And I'm very excited about The Bone Bed coming out in about 3 weeks, and I think you're going to have a lot of fun with this book. It's very unusual. I don't know, some of you who may have read Cause of Death many years ago will remember that Scarpetta worked an underwater crime scene in that book, where she had to get in scuba gear and go into the water in a really scary case. And you're going to see her back in the water again in this one. It's not just about digging up dinosaur bones, which I did for research in this case. And I found some, and a tooth of a Pachyrhinosaurus. And I got covered in mud and stayed in a trailer that had no electricity. And I thought while I was there, I know somebody would get murdered here, you know, in my world. And so that kind of got my wheels turning for what I did in The Bone Bed. And you'll be able to recognize that some of it is very authentic in terms of experiences that I had. The other thing that I am doing is tonight I fly to London, and I'm finishing up research after an additional decade since the Jack the Ripper book came out. So a lot of you have asked about what's going on with that over the years, and you're going to find out fairly soon. There's actually been a lot that's going on with that, and so you'll be hearing more about that in 2013. So I am going back to do battle with Mr. Ripper tonight. So who's going to be a brave person and ask a question? Yes.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
So I have 2 questions. One, I'm a recent new reader. I'm on my 4th book, and I want to know which one did you enjoy writing the most, and why? And I have one more other question. I've noticed that you jump with your style of writing, and I was curious if you wrote a book about the characters, and then you jump like 2 books, and then you separate it. You know how you jump from section to section?
I don't know, but I wouldn't mind jumping now, but let's get some music going. But anyway, I'm not sure I know what you mean by jump, but you have me absolutely intrigued. So, you mean
your
well, I don't
style.
know.
You stop with one character, and then you go on. You continue with another character. You from chapter to chapter. You
so you're probably talking about the Scarpetta books where I use
Yes.
third-person point of view.
Yes.
So, which I'm not. I'm actually. There's another one of those loud things. That's not a golf cart, just so you know. That's actually the whole third-person point of view is an interesting story because for the first 10 years of writing Scarpetta, it was always told from her point of view. And then when I did the Jack the Ripper book and took like a year and a half off from Scarpetta, for which she still hasn't forgiven me, when I came back, I thought, I would really like to explore the perspectives of other characters. I mean, we know what Scarpetta thinks of Scarpetta, but what does Benton really think of her? What does Marino really think of her? What does she really think? What really happens sometimes behind the scenes when they're talking about her and she's not there? And I thought this would be a very interesting way to tell the stories a little bit more like movies. And I did that for a number of books. And then I stopped doing it. The Bone Bed will be the third in the last few years where it's back to Scarpetta's point of view. So there's not so much of that jumping. Unfortunately, it's all her perspective. If you like the jumping, it's not there. That's what I'm trying to warn you about. And but anyway, I don't have any idea if I answered your question at all. But
And a favorite book?
A favorite book. The most fun I ever had writing any of the books I've written were actually the ones that were not necessarily hugely popular. That was the Andy Brazil books. Hornet's Nest, Southern Cross, Isle of Dogs. I have a really dopey, quirky sense of humor, sort of a Far Side sense of humor. When I was in college, I was the newspaper's cartoonist, if that tells you anything. And so I love things that are funny. And I made myself laugh when I was writing those books, but I found out that most people really don't want me to make them laugh. They would rather read something scary. So I haven't done any more of those. You're welcome. Yes.
And she needs to check out the cookbook.
Well, the cookbook, that's a fun book. It was kind of fun to eat while you're doing something, so.
So my question is, we were down here before for James Patterson, and he spoke about writing for children. And I wondered, do you ever think that you would write a book that children can read? I don't mean little children. I mean kids who are very interested in more adult books, but you don't want them to read what they shouldn't read.
Well, I actually did do a children's book, and I want to make sure I include everybody over here. Because I did do a children's book. I think it came out around 2000. I can't remember exactly when it was. It was at least 10 years ago. And I would hazard to say that was probably the least read children's book on the planet. I don't think nobody was particularly interested in Life's Little Fable. And I thought that, because I was asked, I spoke to a second grade class way back then, and they wanted to know if I wrote anything they could read. And I said, no, you really, not one thing do I write that you can read, and should you ever read until you're much, much older, which is silly now. These kids know more about autopsies and gory stuff than I do. So, but I don't think I will be doing any more children's books. And it's interesting question is, what is a children's book anymore? These kids are so sophisticated. And they seem to be rather unfazed by a lot of what I think we would have found rather shocking when we were very little.
Because my introduction to reading was, I didn't like Nancy Drew, but I loved Trixie Belden. I read all of those, and when I read your books, it took me back there. For some reason, that character was not the Trixie Belden was a lot more like Kay Scarpetta to me than Nancy Drew.
Well, I will tell Scarpetta that she was compared to Nancy Drew today. She might even be here somewhere. If you see her, let me know. She's very, very elusive. Yes.
Hi. Well, first, I'd like to thank you so much for your books. They're part of the influence of why I'm in college studying forensic science.
Oh, great. Thank you.
I just wanted to ask, when you started writing the books, were you writing them more for yourself or to expose everyone? And did you know it would have such like a rippling effect?
Well, when I first started, I actually started writing books when I was a little kid. I mean, literally, just a teeny tiny kid. I would write stories and I would illustrate them, and then I would get cardboard or something, and I'd sew little covers on them, usually with a rawhide, shoelace. And I was making books from the time I was really small, and I certainly wasn't doing that for anybody but myself. This was a wonderful way to entertain myself as a kid, and I was saying last night when I was speaking at the Library of Congress, I said, writing is for everybody. It isn't just for authors. I mean, I'm an author because I'm very fortunate that I can make a living writing. But writing is it's a magnificent gift for all people, not only to do it, but to read other people's writing. And when I first started writing, I was writing because I wanted to. And then the next thing that happened, and this is very important if there's any teachers here. Do we have any teachers? Yep. All right. Is that I got encouragement from teachers. They would, put my short stories or my poetry on the bulletin board, which was like the bestseller list back in those days. I mean, if I made the bulletin board, nothing got bigger than that. So then I started thinking, well, other people are liking what I do. So it wasn't until I was in college that I wanted to really pursue it, and some of it is because I just didn't really think I was very good at much else. And I wrote my first novel in college. I would have loved that that had been for other people, but I don't think anybody was much interested. It got me a good grade, but it was a really terrible book. And then eventually I began pursuing that for a living after I was a journalist. But I will say that for those who have, how many here are aspiring writers? Or how many people here have a dream of publishing a book if you haven't already done it? Well, the one thing I will tell you is don't give up, because part of doing this oftentimes, especially if you're going into forensic science, remember I said this, that if you're not met with failure at some point, you're probably not taking enough of a risk. You know, you cannot be good at anything without being bad at it first, and that takes a lot of guts. It takes a lot of guts to go out there and hit a tennis ball badly, and everybody you watch on television hit it badly the first few times they tried. It takes a lot of guts to study a very difficult discipline in forensics and have some failures or not understand something or not get a great grade, or maybe you get something wrong when you're doing some, mock casework, whatever it is. And that's the same thing with writing. I just keep trying. I had multiple failures before I made it, and I still, every time I sit down to write a book, I still always wonder if I'm going to be able to pull it off. I don't have any of the self-assuredness that you might expect that I would have after writing 30-something books. I still feel, what if these people don't talk to me? What if nothing comes? So you have to be persistent. And good luck.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi. First of all, I want to say it's really thrilling to see you in person,
thank you.
because when I read Scarpetta books, I picture you as Scarpetta. So I feel like I'm seeing Scarpetta and Patricia Cornwell at the same time.
Well, that's probably such a hot button for her. I wouldn't say that very often if I were you. I'm not sure she knows who I am, by the way, but she certainly wouldn't think she doesn't look like me. She's much better looking than I am, so.
My question is related to your process, both from a big picture perspective and also, kind of the micro view. Do you have in mind kind of Scarpetta's end game, or does it come to you with every book? So that's kind of the big picture. And then the second picture, which you kind of alluded to, that you get stuck. Are you always thinking about kind of what's next, or what's your creative process? How does that work?
No, Scarpetta does not tell me how she's going to end a book. She's really a very difficult woman to work with. She doesn't tell me anything. I mean, I have to really find it out myself. But more honestly, to answer your question, I write my books the same way I would work a real case. And usually when you're working a real case, you don't know the answer when you've just started. Or if you think you know the answer, you better be very careful so that what you think you know doesn't guide the investigation and the evidence and how you interpret it. That's, for any of you who are in law enforcement, you probably know exactly what I mean by that you need to work a case as if you have no idea who committed this crime. Let the evidence tell you, let witnesses tell you, and make them convince you so that you don't go down a false path. So when I'm writing the Scarpetta books, usually it starts with an idea, a type of crime. It may even be a certain piece of evidence that I want to have be very important and tell an unusual story. And then I sort of see what the characters are going to do with it. And it's a very organic process. I don't use an outline. I don't use index cards. I don't sometimes, when I was working on the bone bed, it wasn't until very late in the game that I knew who the killer was. I wasn't sure. And she wasn't either. And then when she found out, it really was the hard way, as you'll see. This is a very harrowing moment when she realizes who's doing these very, very awful things to people. In Red Mist, I wasn't necessarily sure who was doing it and why until very deep into the book. So, but that's my method. It doesn't necessarily work for other people. So you have to do what works for you.
Thank you.
Sure. Yes?
Hi. I was just wondering, with the recent success and popularity of other writers' characters on film and television, and being in series, I was wondering if there was any interest for turning Kay Scarpetta into.
Oh yes, we have the infamous movie question, which is I say infamous because Scarpetta has been she's the runaway bride of Hollywood. Every time she's almost there, she's gone.
Right.
That lady's been so close to being on the big screen so many times, and then you look and nothing's happened. And so she's been the Scarpetta series has basically been optioned by various studios or production companies since the very first one came out in 1990. And I could write a book in itself about the various things I've been through trying to get Scarpetta on the big screen. The bottom line is we've never had anybody who's been able to write a really great screenplay. And if you think about it, that's probably not surprising. She's a very difficult character to capture, and you really have to know her world. So where we are right now is she's under option with Fox 2000, and we do have a script that I participated in, which is why it's requiring some rewriting, may I add, because that's not my forte. And so we're hopeful. Maybe this time it's going to happen. We should know a lot more fairly soon. Yes. Thank you. Can I just interrupt? If people have questions, it's great if you come up to the mic, or everybody else can't hear you, but can you come over here? And by the way, you guys care if I take my coat off? Like, this is killing me. Whew.
Can you take a question on this side while she's coming up?
Absolutely. Hello.
Hi there. Welcome back to Washington.
Thank you.
Did you come in on the Whirlybird?
No, I didn't this time. Because it's a longer flight from Boston. It's going to take me a little bit too long to get here on the helicopter.
Well, I have to tell you, my last name is Ripper.
Is that right? Was that been good or bad for you?
Well, if I want somebody to remember me, I say something. But you know which of your books I read first?
I can imagine.
But
maybe you should sue him for copyright violation.
Well, after reading your book, I know that wasn't his name, but I have a two-part question on your recorded books. Number one, do you pick the reader? And number two, when they are abridged, do you have the say-so on what is taken out?
Well, what happens with the audiobooks is I don't pick the reader. However, thanks to social networking, and I hope some of you are following me on Facebook and Twitter, I hear things from my fans. And for example, there were some complaints about a recent reader that caused us for the bone bed to change back to somebody we've been using before, all because of fans. So if I get the word on this, because I have people who monitor my sites, because I obviously can't read everything everybody's posting, because there's a lot of lovely people on there. But so we pay attention. I can't remember who's reading the bone bed. Does anybody know? Is Kate Redding? I think so. Whoever, I don't know if that means anything to you, but we got a lot of people that says we like her better, And so, as for the abridged versions, my editor goes through those scripts, and it's a very painful process because they cut about a third of the book out, and it's actually I don't think we're doing the abridged ones anymore. I think that my publisher has stopped that now. If you're going to listen to it, you're going to have to listen to all of it. So
come back and see us again.
Well, but may I ask what your profession is? Have you lived up to your name in any way? I know somebody who runs the New York Medical Examiner's office, and her last name is Butcher, and she's proud to tell you that that's really true. So maybe we don't want to know, but I also knew of a judge once who tried a cattle rustling case in Virginia, and his last name was Bovine, and I kid you not. And how many detectives have we seen with the last name of Gore? So there you go. With the name Ripper, you should have a lot of fun. Yes.
It's an honor to get to
Thank
speak
you.
with you. Like I said, I started reading your books when I was in high school. I snuck them from my mom, and I haven't stopped since. But my question, I'm from the Williamsburg area, so I wanted to ask you about your research for All That Remains and the Colonial Parkway murders.
Yes, the Colonial Parkway murders, which as far as I know, have never been solved. And that was a series of couples who vanished very mysteriously back in the late 80s, I believe it was. And then eventually their remains were found in wooded areas, skeletonized. I was actually still working part-time at the medical examiner's office, which is one of the reasons I knew about the case. I didn't actually go to the scenes or actually see the records or examinations of these people, but it was when I decided to work on that, I decided to write a book using a similar theme because I not only found it terrifying, but also, how does somebody get access to two people like this? Or was it more than one person? Why would someone pull over in their car and then they're vanished from their car and then later their bodies are found? Made me a little worried that it might be somebody that was impersonating a law enforcement individual. Because, I mean, and by the way, this is Patricia's little tip for the day, since everybody who knows me calls me Miss Worst Case Scenario. I'm always thinking of what kills people and hurts them, unfortunately. If you are ever being tailed by an unmarked car with grill lights going, do not pull over. You get on your phone and you call 911 and you say you want verification that really is a law enforcement person that's trying to make you pull over, because you can buy these grill lights and uniforms and stuff anywhere you can think of these days. And so just be careful. Don't necessarily trust what's before your eyes. Be a little bit suspicious like I am and live a lovely, long, and paranoid life.
That was good. I'd like to ask you more of an idea of, I understand some of the creative process you use, but I'd like to know, like, your average working day, where, like, you get up in the morning, and I can tell by your energy level you've got to at least have 10 cups of coffee, okay? And then what's the process? I mean, do you do longhand, do you computer, do you do typewriter, or are you over your garage? Where do you write?
Well, I write in different places, and I basically have a portable office, which is really easy this day and age because so much of your research can be done on the internet. And you know, it wasn't that long ago that I would have as many as 200 reference books in my library, depending on what I was writing about. So I wasn't very portable, or if I had offices elsewhere, I would have duplicate books in every place. Now I'm very happy to say a lot of that isn't necessary. I mean, almost anything, including very technical scientific journal articles, you can find online, which is really, really excellent. But you know, my day starts, it's different. It depends on what I'm doing. Like right now, because I'm working on Jack the Ripper, my day may start with something I'm doing with that. And yes, I do have an office that's separate from where I live. And I also sometimes go places and isolate so that I'm doing nothing but working basically morning, noon, and night. Because I have to really focus on what I'm doing to keep the whole book in my head.
And if you have a certain deadline, does that seem to motivate you more?
I'm always on a deadline. I mean, my biography should be called Deadline. It's really an awful way to live in many ways, because you're never finished with anything. Because even if you finished one book, you got the next one to do.
Point.
But then the other side of that is, if I didn't have that, I think my life would feel very empty. So I don't know, for you, those of you here who are journalists and writers, I'm sure you know what I mean. And a deadline is very motivating, though. Because I was a journalist, I got used to that. And of course, in college, you get used to it. How many people here still have nightmares that it's the day before your term paper's due and you haven't started it?
Yeah, right.
You know, those anxiety dreams, like your teeth falling out. We all have those.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yes, sir.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm very interested in the early Scarpetta books. They seem to involve a lot more technical analysis in coming to a solution in the latter books. And I don't know whether I'm just confusing this with some of your other books that are not Scarpetta books. Am I imagining this, or they just, when your niece was much younger in the earlier books, they just seem to be more forensic oriented?
Well, I think they're still extremely forensic oriented. In fact, I think that, for example, in Port Mortuary, which preceded Red Mist, I almost worried it was too technical, especially since I introduced the forensic radiology, you know, using CT scanners. And so I think they're still very technical and very forensically driven. I think what you might be sensing, though, is in the first 10 years of the Scarpetta books, before CSI, there really wasn't anybody doing what I was doing, and there wasn't as much information readily available to people about, for example, if you're talking about a scanning electron microscope, what is that? Well, I can mention a scanning electron microscope in a book now, and while I will give you a description of someone doing it, I won't do 10 pages on it because you can see it on television. So my formula, if there is such a thing, for the first decade of my books, and I think this is again what you might be sensing, is I would take a certain discipline of forensic science, such as forensic fire investigation, and I'd say, I'm going to show my audience what forensic fire investigation is like. And so then the book became a bit of a procedural in terms of using that to solve a crime. I do a less procedural method now because everything on television is a procedural. So I've had to sort of change my emphasis, and maybe my characters wear forensic technology like old pair of sneakers. It's there, but I don't flaunt it quite as much, perhaps. Thank you. Yes?
When you write, do you have crimes in mind, or is it things that are based on true events or things that you've dreamed up?
Usually it's not based on anything that I've seen in the news. For example, in Red Mist, I'm not going to tell you, if you haven't read it, I'm not going to tell you what the terrible weapon is that's used. But I've started getting a little more interested in what I call, acts of terror. In fact, I'm glad you brought this up because this is a really important point. In the 90s in particular, the thing that terrified everybody the most were the Ted Bundys of the world. You know, these, quote, serial killers. The Silence of the Lambs type thing was what captured everybody's imagination in a horrifying way. And that was pretty much the sorts of crimes I was writing about. I think in modern times, we now have a whole set of fears. I'll be honest with you, I'm more worried about what might happen at a shopping mall than I'm worried about a serial killer coming through my window. And I think that the creativity of what people can turn into a weapon to use against people they don't even know, and not just overseas, but here. And I mean, we've all, just think about what happened not so long ago at the Batman movie. I mean, those are things that were inconceivable 10 and 15 years ago. Nobody thought of things like this. So what drives me is what is really going on in our society. Because Scarpetta lives in the same world you do, and I make very certain of that, whether it's social technologies, for example, in the bone bed. Well, let me just ask you, who of all the characters should not do Twitter? Marino. I mean, the big lump. Can you imagine him starting to, oh my God, and does he cause a mess? So for those of you who are Twitter bugs, you will get a big kick out of good old Pete Marino deciding to do his social networking to build up his fan club, because he should have one after all. So I root these people in the same world we all live in, and that means Scarpetta's going to be dealing with the kinds of crimes that not only happen today, or that we fear could happen today. So that's really where I get my ideas for this. What that means is, for somebody like me, is I have to always continue to do research. Yes, I get a lot of great information off the internet, but I still go to medical examiners' offices, I go to labs, I hang out with the real people, I ride with the police. You cannot rest on your laurels, because your readers will always know.
Okay. And one last question.
Yes.
You had mentioned that you would be signing Red Mist. Are you signing other books as well?
No, I think I'm just signing Red Mist. I think if people have brought other books, they will limit how many, just so that we can get through the line. And so I've got a plane to catch a little later. I've got to go get Mr. Ripper. He's still running around out there, and I've had enough of him. I'm going to get him this time, I'm telling you. You're welcome. Yes, sir?
Thank you. I have a question on behalf of my wife, and then a second question. The first is, she was quite upset when you killed Benton and brought him back. And so the question I have is, what caused that? What caused the decision to do that and then bring him back? And leading to that, to my second question is, as I'm thinking about writing, I look at how other writers have a main character they carry through a series. Could you talk about what that's like? Do you get tired of writing that one character, and how do you take on the persona of different other characters while you do that?
Well, I'll start with that. I'll start with your second question about getting tired of a character. If I were to get tired of Scarpetta, I wouldn't do it anymore, because there'd be no point. If I get tired of her, you would be tired of her. And so, fortunately, I picked a character who is so unusual and so smart that she always keeps me busy just trying to figure her out. I mean, she's, you know, I'm not a forensic pathologist. I don't have a law degree. I couldn't do a CT scan if I tried, but I can write about these things. I've never done an autopsy. I have immersed myself in the world of all these things so that I make you feel they're real. But I don't know what it's like to go to medical school, and she did all that. So that's why I don't get bored with her, because there's so much to mine when you're dealing with a complicated character like Scarpetta. I enjoy her. I still do. I mean, I've always said to people, you know, I really wish she were real. I mean, I'd love to sit down and talk to her, because I think she's an amazing character, and I don't mean to sound arrogant, but I like her. There have been times when I don't like some of the other characters. And this is really fun to go through if you're a novelist, because you have this happen. Like, I got really sick of Marino. And I was like, I could hardly stand to have him in my office anymore. There he is. No, good morning to you, too. What kind of jerky thing are you going to do today? But he's actually getting a little better. So he had to have his bad spell. We won't talk about that in polite company. But as far as killing off Benton, you need to tell your wife, I did not kill him. Why does everybody say, why'd you kill him? I wasn't even there. So I didn't do it. You know, it's sort of like, actually in that same book, Point of Origin, my publisher, after she read it, she said, you know, the last night they were together and you did not have them have sex. And I said, they have yet to ask my permission to have sex. And furthermore, I don't know if they had sex because I'm not always in the room, and I don't blame them. And they're not going to have sex just because I tell them to. Just try doing that with your characters. All right, listen, you two. Let's go at it now. And make me believe it. They're just staring at you. Suddenly the screen's just blinking like this. So I let things happen in the books that feels inevitable at the time. And I didn't plan on this happening to Benton when I started Point of Origin way back in 1997 or whenever it was. And when I saw that it was sort of going to happen, I just didn't stop it. But then I had all my fans get extremely upset, and several of them at meetings like this, they would raise their hand and they say, but is he really dead? And I said, that's a good question. You know, I wasn't there, and because it was Scarpetta's point of view, she wasn't there either. She's only going on what people reported to her and on seeing some white hair and other gory things, and an autopsy report for a medical examination that she didn't do, of course. And so I started thinking, you know, Kay, when you got a moment, could we chat? Because are we sure Benton's really dead? And it turned out he wasn't. So, as usual, my readers knew more than I did. So,
thank you.
You tell your wife next time that she should come too and ask a question. Well, that's you. But I bet he does what you tell him at home too. Does he? No, she's shaking her head. I want to talk to you later and know what your formula is for all that, all right? Yes.
Hello. First of all, I'm very excited to see you here. I really love your books.
Thank you.
My question is, as I've read your books, I've seen that a handful of authors really create strong female characters, and so I wanted to thank you for creating such a strong female character. I think it's great to have someone who knows what they're doing. And so I wanted to know, was it your intent to, I guess, inspire people with a character like that, or was it something where perhaps, you know, the character somehow came up that way? What was your thinking in terms of the character?
Well, I've been very fortunate in that I have known a lot of very strong women, and not necessarily people that you might expect. But for example, when I was growing up in the teeny tiny town of Montreat, North Carolina, I knew Ruth Graham, Billy Graham's wife. She's unfortunately no longer with us. And she was, without a doubt, a force to be reckoned with in that town. Somebody who was courageous and good and very funny and a real role model. So there have been a lot of role models, and I'm getting the 5-minute sign. Thank you. I was also grew up when Billie Jean King dominated the tennis world, and who's now somebody who happens to be a very dear friend of mine. And I would get inspired from watching that. I think women are strong. I don't know why anybody's ever thought otherwise. And men are strong too. I don't want any men to feel left out here. I'm an equal opportunity employer. But I think women are amazingly strong, and women doctors, women medical examiners, women lawyers. If nothing else, women journalists. You know, if nothing else, you have to be strong to deal with all those kids, I guess, huh? So I hope that answered your question.
Yes, I just wanted to know, what your particular intent. I guess you didn't have an intent to create that character, but thank you for doing what you've done.
No, I think I couldn't write about a woman and not make her strong.
Don't kill her, please.
No, I'm more worried about her killing me first. No, Scarpetta. But anyway, no, there's only two types of women I can really write about. They're either really strong or they're really evil, have you noticed? So I think we have time for maybe one more. Thanks.
Hi. I've been reading you since the very beginning. I love your books. When I read a Kay Scarpetta novel, when I'm finished with it, she's with me for a good month afterwards. She lives in my home.
Maybe that's why I can't find her. Do you know, now you're in big trouble because I usually go a whole month and I can't find her anywhere after I finish the book. She's been with you the whole time.
She's with me. I live and breathe it for a good month afterwards, and then the next one comes along and she's there again.
Well, I'm glad you send her back eventually.
So I'm just wondering how, as an author, when you create these novels over and over again, how do you keep your life separate, and how do they not just be part of your life all the time, these wonderful characters?
I think they are part of my life all the time. I mean, even right now, we're all talking about these characters as if they're real, so they're part of all of our lives. And of course, when I'm really busy with Scarpetta, as Stacy will tell you, I go home and that's all I do is talk about it. Usually complaining, because nothing ever goes as fast as I want it to. They are not to be rushed. They do things in their own timing. So, but one thing that's important to remember about that is if you want to write, or you do write, it's really important that you write about something you can live with, because it will live with you. And that's one of the reasons, except for the Ripper book, I don't do true crime. Because if I had to spend all of my time dealing with some of the details of real crime stories and the horror of it, I think it would be so depressing to me that I just don't think I could stand it. So you've been a great, wonderful audience. I'm going to go sign books, so please come. Thanks.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.